Welcome, dear friends, to a journey into a world that time has almost forgotten, a world of beauty, mystery, and power, the Minoans of Knossos. Today, we step back more than San-Wubact years to the sunlit shores of Crete, where an extraordinary civilization rose from the heart of the Aegean Sea. This was a people of art and elegance, masters of the seas, builders of labyrinthine palaces, and storytellers whose myths would echo through the ages. The Palace of Knossos was not merely a home for kings, it was the beating heart of an empire, a place where merchants bartered goods from Egypt and Cyprus, where priestesses danced in sacred courtyards, and where legends of the Minotaur and Labyrinth were born. In this series, we will explore their glorious rise, their golden age of prosperity, and their mysterious decline. We will meet the rulers, the artisans, the sailors, and the gods they worshipped. Every fresco, every relic, every whisper of stone will guide us deeper into their story. So sit back, open your mind, and join me as we sail across the ancient Mediterranean to the land of the Minoans of Knossos. The sun rises over the shimmering waters of the Aegean, painting the island of Crete in gold. Waves lap against its rugged coastline, where mountains tumble into fertile valleys. This land, rich in olive groves and vineyards, stands at the crossroads of the ancient world, a jewel between Europe, Asia, and Africa. Long before the age of empires, small villages clung to its hillsides. The people here learned to farm the land, tend goats and sheep, and fish the abundant seas. They built their homes from stone and clay, their lives tied to the rhythms of the earth and the tides. But Crete was not just a place to live, it was a place to dream. It was here, legend says, that Zeus himself was born in a hidden cave on Mount Ida, cradled by the nymphs and protected from his father, Knossos. The people honored these myths, blending them into their daily life, their rituals, and their identity, Haryi. From its harbors, early sailors ventured out in sturdy boats, trading obsidian, honey, and fine pottery. Crete's location made it a meeting point of cultures, ideas, and goods. This was the seedbed of the Minoan civilization, a land destined to flourish, to shape legends, and to leave behind a legacy that would echo through millennia. The early dawn of the Minoan civilization was quiet but full of promise. Around Sancine BCE, Crete's scattered farming villages began to grow and connect. Families tilled the soil, cultivating barley, wheat, grapes, and olives. Shepherds guided their flocks across rolling hills, while fishermen kept the island well fed from the bounty of the sea. It was a time of invention and exchange. Craftsmen shaped stone into tools and carved wood into fine vessels. Potters began to mold clay into graceful jars, decorated with swirling patterns inspired by the waves and the spirals of seashells. These objects were not just useful, they were beautiful, reflecting a people who saw art in everyday life. Trade became the lifeblood of the island. Small boats ventured farther, bringing obsidian from the Cyclades, copper from Cyprus, and exotic shells from Egypt. With each voyage, Crete grew richer in both goods and ideas. The people learned new techniques, absorbed foreign influences, and wove them into their own unique style. Though they had no grand palaces yet, the seeds of greatness were sown. Villages grew into towns, and leaders emerged, respected not only for their strength, but for their wisdom in guiding trade, resolving disputes, and protecting their people. The dawn of the Minoans was not just the birth of a civilization. It was the awakening of a culture that would one day dazzle the ancient world. In the heart of Minoan legend stands the figure of King Minos, a ruler so powerful and wise that even the gods were said to respect him. Myth tells us he was the son of Zeus and Europa, destined to bring order and greatness to Crete. But with greatness came shadows, and the most famous of these is the tale of the Labyrinth and the Minotaur. The story begins when Poseidon, god of the sea, sent Minos a magnificent white bull as a sign of divine favor. Yet Minos, unwilling to sacrifice the creature, kept it for himself. Angered, Poseidon cursed Minos' wife, Pasiphae, leading to the birth of the Minotaur, a half-man, half-bull creature of terrible strength. To hide the shame, Minos commanded the master craftsman Daedalus to build a prison unlike any other, the Labyrinth, a twisting maze beneath the palace where the beast would dwell. Whether this tale is pure myth or rooted in real events, it reflects the Minoan fascination with bulls, power, and divine authority. Archaeologists believe the sprawling palace of Knossos, with its many rooms, corridors, and hidden chambers, may have inspired the legend itself. For the Minoans, the line between myth and history was thin, and both shaped the identity of their great king. Around 10 BCE, Crete entered a new age of ambition and artistry. In the fertile valley near the river Kairatos, the first great palace of Knossos rose from the earth, a sprawling complex of stone, timber, and plaster. This was not merely a royal residence. It was a political center, a religious hub, and the beating heart of Minoan society. Its walls enclosed storerooms filled with giant clay pithoi, brimming with olive oil, wine, and grain. Courtyards echoed with the sound of trade negotiations, processions, and religious ceremonies. Painted frescoes adorned the plastered walls, their colors still vibrant after centuries. Dolphins leaping through turquoise waves, maidens in flowing skirts, and acrobats vaulting over bulls in feats of daring grace. The palace's design was a marvel, multi-story buildings connected by grand staircases, light wells flooding rooms with sunshine, and a network of corridors so intricate it might well have inspired the legend of the Labyrinth. At its heart lay sacred spaces dedicated to the mother goddess, whose protection was sought for harvests, trade, and the safety of the people. This first palace would stand for centuries, a testament to Minoan ingenuity, until earthquakes and time demanded it be rebuilt, grander than ever before. But here, in these first walls, the dream of Knossos was born. The sea was the lifeblood of the Minoans, and Knossos was its beating heart. By Echenjobite BCE, Minoan ships, swift and strong, cut through the blue waters of the Aegean, their sails filled with the warm Mediterranean winds. These vessels carried more than goods. They carried the influence of Crete to distant shores. From the harbors of Knossos, traders sailed to the Cyclades, Cyprus, Anatolia, and Egypt. They brought back copper for bronze, precious stones, and exotic spices. In return, they sold fine Minoan pottery, olive oil, wine, and intricate jewelry, items coveted in foreign markets. The sea lanes became as familiar to Minoan sailors as the mountain paths to shepherds at home. This web of trade brought prosperity, but also ideas. Foreign motifs began appearing in Minoan art, while Egyptian scarabs and Syrian ivory found their way into Cretan homes. Markets in Knossos buzzed with languages from far-off lands, the air rich with the scent of myrrh and the gleam of polished bronze. It was a golden age of exchange, where the Minoans became not only merchants, but cultural ambassadors. The trade winds of the Aegean carried with them the seeds of a civilization that was both uniquely Cretan and richly cosmopolitan. Within the sunlit streets of Knossos, life flowed with a rhythm as old as the island itself. Stone-paved pathways wound between houses painted in warm ochres and reds. In the cool morning air, bakers kneaded barley dough for bread, while the scent of herbs and roasting meats drifted from open courtyards. Families lived in multi-room homes, with upper floors for sleeping and lower floors for storage and work. Furniture was simple yet well-crafted: wooden stools, woven reed mats, and clay vessels for water and wine. The walls were often decorated with small frescoes, reflecting the Minoans' love for beauty in daily surroundings. Children played with clay figurines and chased one another through alleyways, while women spun wool into thread or wove bright textiles on wooden looms. Men worked as farmers, fishermen, merchants, and craftsmen, but all shared in the life of the community. At midday, the market came alive with chatter, traders calling out prices, neighbors exchanging gossip, and musicians filling the air with the sound of flutes and drums. In evenings, families gathered for meals, telling stories lit by flickering oil lamps. Knossos was not just a palace. It was a living, breathing city where the Minoans blended work, art, and joy into the fabric of everyday life. In the world of the Minoans, women stood at the very heart of society. Unlike in many ancient cultures, Minoan women were not hidden away. They appeared prominently in art, religion, and daily life. Frescoes show them leading processions, engaging in rituals, and even participating in sports such as bull leaping. Women played a central role in the Minoan religion, often serving as priestesses of the mother goddess. In sacred ceremonies held within palace courtyards or mountaintop sanctuaries, they wore elaborate flounced skirts, bare-bosomed bodices, and intricate jewelry of gold and semi-precious stones. Their presence signified fertility, prosperity, and the divine connection between humans and nature. Beyond religion, women could be merchants, landowners, and skilled artisans. They managed households, supervised agricultural work, and maintained the networks that sustained Crete's prosperity. Minoan art often portrays them with grace and confidence, suggesting a society where femininity was not weakness, but power. This elevated status may have been rooted in the island's goddess-centered religion, where creation and life itself were seen as feminine forces. The role of women in Minoan society remains one of the most fascinating aspects of their civilization, a reminder that in Knossos, authority wore many faces, and some of them were crowned with flowers, not helmets. For the Minoans, the divine was everywhere, in the mountains, the sea, the trees, and the very stones of Knossos. Their religion was deeply tied to nature and cycles of life, centering on powerful goddesses who embodied fertility, the harvest, and protection. The mother goddess, often shown holding snakes or standing atop a mountain, was the supreme figure, a guardian of both people and land. Ceremonies took place in palace courtyards, caves, and hilltop sanctuaries. Priests and priestesses led processions bearing offerings of grain, honey, and wine. Bulls, a sacred symbol, were central to many rites, their strength and vitality linked to divine power. Minoan worship blended art and spirituality. Frescoes depicted sacred dances, women in elaborate costumes raising their arms to the heavens, and nature motifs like lilies, birds, and dolphins. Ritual vessels, carved from stone or shaped from clay, were crafted with great care for offerings and libations. Religious life was not hidden. It was woven into public festivals and everyday events. The people believed that by honoring the gods and goddesses, they ensured harmony between humans and nature. This deep reverence for the sacred shaped the Minoan worldview, making Knossos as much a spiritual center as a political one. The walls of Knossos were alive with color. Minoan artists transformed plaster into vivid worlds of movement and beauty, creating frescoes that still dazzle thousands of years later. These paintings were more than decoration. They were expressions of identity, belief, and the joy of life. Frescoes adorned palace corridors, reception halls, and private chambers. The colors came from natural pigments, deep reds from iron-rich earth, brilliant blues from powdered azurite, and warm yellows from ochre. Once applied to wet plaster, the pigments bonded with the surface, ensuring the art would endure through the centuries. The subjects revealed much about Minoan values. Dolphins leapt gracefully in turquoise seas, symbolizing the island's deep bond with the ocean. Young athletes soared over the backs of bulls in daring displays of agility. Women in flounced skirts and intricate jewelry appeared prominently, reflecting their high status. Even simple scenes, lilies swaying in the wind, birds in flight, spoke of a people attuned to nature's rhythms. Art in Knossos was not static. Figures danced, animals moved, and the entire composition seemed to flow like water. It was a style unique in the ancient world, full of life and color, capturing not just what was seen, but how it felt to live on Crete during its golden age. Among the most iconic images of Minoan culture is the daring spectacle of bull leaping, a sport, ritual, and art form all in one. In the courtyards of Knossos, before crowds of cheering spectators, young men and women faced powerful bulls in displays of agility and courage that still capture the imagination today. The event began with a charge. The bull, muscles rippling, thundered across the arena. At the precise moment, the leaper grasped its horns, using the animal's own momentum to vault high into the air. With a twist of the body, they flipped over the bull's back, landing gracefully on the other side. Each movement had to be perfect. One misstep could mean serious injury or death. Whether bull leaping was purely sport or a sacred rite is still debated. Frescoes suggest it may have been a symbolic act, a union of human skill and animal strength, a tribute to the gods, and a celebration of life's vitality. The presence of both male and female athletes is striking, revealing again the Minoans' unique approach to gender roles. To the people of Knossos, bull leaping was more than entertainment. It was a test of skill, bravery, and harmony with nature. A living expression of the energy that defined Minoan civilization long before the Greeks penned their epics. The Minoans developed a writing system known today as Linear A, a script that still guards its secrets from modern scholars. Found on clay tablets, seals, and ceremonial vessels, Linear A was the language of palace administrators, traders, and priests. The symbols, etched with a stylus into damp clay, recorded transactions, inventories, and possibly religious texts. Once dried in the sun or accidentally baked during palace fires, these tablets survived for thousands of years. Some signs resemble human figures, plants, or tools, while others are purely abstract. What makes Linear A so mysterious is that it remains undeciphered. Unlike its successor, Linear B, used by the Mycenaeans, there is no known language to match it against. It is a script without a clear voice, leaving us to wonder what stories, prayers, and laws were once written in its flowing symbols. For the Minoans, writing was a tool of order and power. It kept the vast economy of Knossos running smoothly, tracked goods from distant lands, and perhaps recorded the myths told by priests in palace sanctuaries. Each inscribed tablet is a fragment of a lost conversation, a silent whisper from a civilization that spoke to us in symbols. We can see, but not yet understand, by the height of its power, the Minoan civilization extended far beyond the shores of Crete. Minoan ships became a common sight in harbors from the Cyclades to Cyprus their painted prows cutting through the waves with ease. These voyages were not only about trade, they spread Minoan culture, art, and ideas across the eastern Mediterranean. Archaeological evidence shows Minoan pottery, fresco styles, and religious symbols appearing on distant islands and mainland sites. Their influence reached Egypt, where Minoan envoys brought fine goods as tribute and received exotic treasures in return. In Anatolia and the Levant, Cretan designs inspired local artisans, blending styles into a shared visual language of the sea. This expansion was not achieved through conquest, but through diplomacy and commerce. The Minoans' command of maritime routes gave them a kind of sea empire, depression, with influence anchored by trust, reliability, and the allure of their artistry. As their ships returned to Knossos laden with copper, ivory, and luxury goods, the city grew wealthier, its palaces more splendid, and its festivals more lavish. The Minoans became not just traders, but cultural leaders of the Bronze Age world, a people whose style, and spirit were carried on every wind that filled their sails. Inside the sprawling palace of Knossos, life was a careful balance of ceremony and administration. This was not simply a royal residence. It was the nerve center of the Minoan world. Every corridor, storeroom, and chamber served a purpose, from governing trade to overseeing religious rites. The palace functioned as a vast administrative hub. Scribes recorded shipments of grain, oil, and wine onto clay tablets, while stewards managed distribution to villages and foreign traders. The great storerooms were lined with massive pithoi, jars large enough to hold hundreds of liters of goods, each marked symbols for inventory. Beyond the bustle of economic management, there was a world of diplomacy. Envoys from distant lands were received in grand halls adorned with frescoes and fine furniture. Here, leaders negotiated trade agreements, celebrated festivals, and cemented alliances. The palace was also a place of order. Its layout, with interconnected rooms and light wells, reflected the Minoans' mastery of architecture. Guards kept watch at key entrances, while servants moved quietly through hidden corridors, ensuring that royal life flowed without interruption. At its height, Knossos was more than stone walls. It was an organism, alive with the rhythm of politics, religion, and economy, each heartbeat echoing through the labyrinthine halls. Life in Knossos was not all work and administration. It was also filled with music, dance, and celebration. The Minoans loved festivals, which blended religious devotion with joyful feasting. These events marked the changing of the seasons, successful harvests, and sacred rituals dedicated to their gods and goddesses. The palace courtyards came alive during such occasions. Colorful banners fluttered in the warm breeze. As people gathered from across Crete, musicians played flutes, lyres, and drums, their rhythms echoing against the palace walls. Dancers, dressed in bright skirts and embroidered tunics, spun and leapt in time with the music, their movements telling stories of creation, nature, and the gods. Feasts followed the ceremonies. Long tables were laden with roasted lamb, honey cakes, fresh fruit, olives, and amphorae of wine. Guests sat together, merchants beside farmers, nobles beside artisans, sharing food and laughter. These gatherings strengthened the bonds between communities and reinforced the unity of Minoan society. Many festivals also involved processions to sacred sites, where offerings were given to ensure fertility for the land and prosperity for the people. These moments of shared joy and reverence reflected the Minoans' deep connection to both nature and each other. In Knossos, feasts and festivals were more than entertainment. They were the heartbeat of a culture that celebrated life as a sacred gift. For the Minoans, music and dance were more than entertainment. They were essential threads in the fabric of life. Whether in grand palace ceremonies, bustling markets, or intimate family gatherings, the sound of music was never far away. Musicians played flutes carved from bone, lyres strung with gut, and frame drums stretched with animal hide. Seashell trumpets called people to festivities, while rhythmic clapping and foot stamping kept the beat alive. The melodies, often inspired by the sea, the wind, and bird calls, echoed through the courtyards of Knossos. Dance was equally vital. Minoan dancers moved with a grace that reflected the fluid patterns of their art and nature. Men and women performed together, their steps telling stories of love, harvest, and the gods. Some dances were ritual, slow, deliberate movements before a sacred altar, while others were joyful and athletic, filled with leaps, spins, and dramatic gestures. Even work could become a performance. Fishermen sang as they hauled in their nets, and farmers danced in celebration of a good harvest. These acts were not simply for show, they were expressions of gratitude, identity, and community. In the heart of Knossos, music and dance reminded the people that life was meant to be lived with rhythm, beauty, and connection, in harmony with the world around them. For the Minoans, nature was not just a backdrop, it was the living heart of their world. The mountains, fertile valleys, and surrounding sea shaped their beliefs, economy, and daily life. Every breeze, every tide, and every harvest was seen as part of a divine cycle that bound humans and the natural world together. The sea was their greatest ally. It provided fish, linked them to distant lands, and carried their influence across the Mediterranean. Sailors learned the patterns of the winds and stars, reading the sea like a book. Dolphins, fish, and shell motifs appeared in art, celebrating the ocean's beauty and abundance. The land was equally sacred. Olive groves and vineyards covered the hillsides, while fields of barley and wheat fed the people. Springs and rivers were believed to hold spiritual power, and mountaintops often housed small shrines where offerings were left to the gods. Animals, too, were part of the sacred order. Bulls, snakes, and birds held symbolic meaning, appearing in frescoes and rituals. To harm nature recklessly was to invite misfortune. Respect for the earth was woven into the Minoan way of life. In Knossos, nature and the sea were more than resources. They were partners in the dance of survival and prosperity, guiding the rhythms of work, worship, and art. The Minoans were not an isolated island people. They were masters of diplomacy, weaving bonds with distant lands across the eastern Mediterranean. Of all their partners, Egypt was perhaps the most important. Egyptian records depict Cretan envoys bringing exotic goods as tribute, fine pottery, scented oils, and intricately crafted jewelry. In return, the Minoans received gold, ivory, papyrus, and luxury items that spoke of the Nile's wealth. Egyptian art even shows foreigners dressed in Minoan-style clothing, their hair bound in long locks, suggesting that these meetings were frequent and significant. Beyond Egypt, Minoan merchants traveled to the Levant, Anatolia, and the Aegean Islands. Their influence can be seen in foreign artifacts decorated with Cretan motifs and in the adoption of Minoan artistic techniques abroad. These exchanges were not merely economic, they were cultural, fostering a shared visual language among the great coastal civilizations of the Bronze Age. The Minoan success lay in their reputation for fairness and quality. Their goods were prized for beauty and craftsmanship, their ships respected for reliability, and their leaders admired for diplomacy. Through these relationships, Knossos became a hub of wealth and influence, a place where the treasures of many lands met beneath the the palace's frescoed walls. In the workshops of Knossos, the air was filled with the sounds of hammers on bronze, the hum of potters' wheels, and the steady rasp of stone being shaped into beauty. The Minoans were master craftsmen, creating goods so fine that they were sought across the ancient world. Potters shaped elegant amphorae, kylixes, and stirrup jars, often decorated with swirling marine patterns, octopuses stretching their tentacles across curved surfaces, dolphins dancing among waves, and shells spiraling in. Goldsmiths worked with precision, fashioning delicate necklaces, rings, and diadems, sometimes inlaid with carnelian, lapis lazuli, or faience imported from Egypt. Stoneworkers carved ritual vessels, known as rhytons, from serpentine, steatite, and even rock crystal. Some took the form of bulls' heads, their horns gilded, their eyes inlaid with mother of pearl. Textile weavers produced richly dyed fabrics, using patterns inspired by nature and palace frescoes. These goods were more than luxury. They were cultural symbols. A Minoan amphora in a foreign palace told of Knossos' artistry. Knossos' way, a gold pendant worn in Egypt, spoke of Crete's skill and taste. Every object was crafted to last, made not only for use, but to inspire admiration. In their craftsmanship, the Minoans revealed who they were, a people who valued beauty, precision, and the harmonious blending of art and life. Around the mid-7th century BCE, a distant but catastrophic event shook the Minoan world. The eruption of the volcanic island of Thera, known today as Santorini. What began as a rumble beneath the sea quickly escalated into one of the most powerful eruptions in recorded history. The sky darkened as ash billowed high into the atmosphere, carried by winds across the Aegean. Entire settlements on Thera were buried under volcanic debris, their streets and houses frozen in time beneath layers of pumice. The eruption triggered tsunamis that swept toward Crete's northern coast, smashing into harbors, destroying ships, and flooding fertile lands. For the Minoans, this was more than a natural disaster. Trade networks were disrupted, crops failed in the ash-covered fields, and coastal towns were left in ruins. The shockwaves rippled through the political and economic stability of Knossos. Legends may have been born from this catastrophe. Some scholars suggest that the story of Atlantis, told centuries later by Plato, was inspired by memories of Thera's destruction. Whether or not that is true, the eruption marked a turning point, one from which the Minoan civilization would never fully recover. Crete has always been a land where the earth shifts beneath one's feet. In the years following the eruption of Thera, the Minoans faced another relentless force of nature. Earthquakes. The island lies on a tectonic fault line, and tremors were a part of life. But these quakes were unusually powerful, toppling walls, cracking stone pavements, and bringing down sections of the great palace of Knossos. In an instant, frescoes that had taken months to paint were shattered, storerooms collapsed, and goods meant for trade lay buried under rubble. Villagers rushed into open courtyards for safety, watching as the earth heaved and buildings crumbled. Yet the Minoans were nothing if not resilient. Almost as soon as the tremors ended, the work of rebuilding began. Skilled masons reset stone blocks, carpenters replaced wooden beams, and artists repainted damaged walls. New architectural innovations were introduced, stronger foundations, better drainage systems, and redesigned layouts that improved light and ventilation. These disasters, though devastating, also gave the Minoans an opportunity to renew their city. Knossos emerged from the ruins grander and more sophisticated than before, its courtyards brighter, its halls more ornate. The spirit of the people endured, proving that even the earth's fury could not silence the heartbeat of Minoan life. In the decades After the disasters of Thera and the earthquakes, the balance of power in the Aegean began to shift. From the Greek mainland, the Mycenaeans, a warrior people skilled in both trade and conquest, grew stronger. Their ships started to appear more frequently in Cretan waters, not just as trading partners, but as political rivals. At first, relations were cooperative. Mycenaean merchants brought fine weapons, precious metals, and horses in exchange for Minoan goods. Their influence began to seep into Cretan culture, new pottery styles, different weapon designs, and a growing emphasis on fortification. The Linear B script, used by the Mycenaeans, began to appear alongside the older Linear A on administrative tablets. Over time, the Mycenaeans gained more control over trade routes, reducing the Minoans' maritime dominance. Some historians believe they established political influence in Knossos itself, perhaps even taking over its administration. Frescoes began to show themes more aligned with Mycenaean tastes, and art became less focused on nature and more on power and hierarchy. The rise of Mycenaean influence marked the beginning of the end for Minoan independence. While the culture of Knossos endured, it was no longer purely Minoan. It was a blend, a civilization in transition, and a sign that the Bronze Age world was changing. By the late 6th century BCE, Knossos entered what historians call the final palace period. The city still bustled with life. Markets thrived, ships sailed to distant lands, and the palace's storerooms overflowed with goods. Yet beneath the surface, change was in the air. The architecture of this period reflected both prosperity and caution. The palace was repaired and expanded after earlier disasters, with stronger walls and more secure storage rooms. Decorative frescoes still adorned the halls, but their themes were shifting. Scenes of power, processions, and warriors appeared alongside the older images of dolphins, lilies, and joyous dancers. Administration became the Linear B script associated with the Mycenaeans now dominated official records, suggesting their firm grip on political life. Minoan and Mycenaean cultures blended, but the soul of Knossos still shone through. In the flowing lines of its art, in the music of its festivals, and in the skilled craftsmanship of its workshops. Despite the sense of continuity, there was also an undercurrent of vulnerability. Trade routes were more contested, and foreign powers loomed closer than ever. The final palace period was a time of grace before decline, a last flowering of Minoan culture. Still vibrant but standing at the edge of history's shadow, the end of Knossos came not with a single blow, but through a series of events that eroded the power and stability of the once great palace city. Historians still debate the exact cause. Some point to foreign invasion, others to internal unrest, and some to a combination of both. What is certain is that by around 1000 BCE, the heart of Minoan civilization had gone silent. Archaeological evidence shows signs of fire in the palace's central areas, its storerooms and administrative offices. Pithoi lay shattered, charred beams collapsed onto the floors, and frescoes blackened under smoke. Whether this destruction was the result of war, accidental fire, or deliberate sabotage remains uncertain. The Mycenaeans, already influential on the island, may have seized the opportunity to take control entirely. With them came new rulers, new administrative systems, and the final dominance of the Linear B script. Minoan independence was gone, and Knossos became just one center in a wider Mycenaean world. For the people who had called Knossos home, the fall marked the end of an era. The laughter in the markets faded, the music of the courtyards stilled, and the once bright walls of the palace crumbled into ruins. The age of the Minoans had passed into memory. and legend. The fall of Knossos did not mean the disappearance of the Minoan people. Life continued in the villages, farms, and small towns scattered across Crete. Without the great palace to unify the island, society became more localized. Communities turned inward, focusing on survival and preserving the traditions that had shaped them for centuries. The Mycenaeans now ruled much of Crete, and their influence was felt in administration, trade, and even religion. Yet, Minoan customs persisted. Farmers still cultivated olives and grapes in the terraced hillsides. Fishermen sailed in small boats along familiar coasts. Women wore flounced skirts and colorful bodices, though the fabrics bore new patterns from the mainland. Art and craftsmanship adapted to the new reality. Pottery became simpler, with fewer elaborate marine motifs, but the skill in shaping and firing clay remained unmatched. Religious practices blended old and new, as goddesses shared space with Mycenaean deities in small shrines. Even in this reduced state, the Minoan spirit endured. Songs, dances, and local festivals kept alive the memory of a more glorious age. In the quiet courtyards of village homes, elders told stories of the great palace, the bull leapers, and the voyages across the wine-dark sea. Knossos had fallen, but the heart of Crete still beat strong even after the palaces fell and the Minoans faded from political power. Their stories lived on, woven into the mythology of the Greeks and passed down through generations. These tales transformed historical memories into timeless legends, ensuring that the Minoans would never be entirely forgotten. Foremost among them was the myth of King Minos and the Labyrinth, a maze so vast that none could escape, built to contain the monstrous Minotaur. The hero Theseus, aided by Minos' daughter Ariadne, slew the beast and found his way out using her thread. Though the real palace of Knossos may have inspired this tale, the myth grew far beyond its origins, becoming a symbol of cunning, bravery, and betrayal. Other legends told of Daedalus, the master craftsman, and his son Icarus, who dared to fly with wings of wax and feathers, a warning against hubris. The god Zeus himself was said to have been born on Crete, hidden away in a cave on Mount Ida to escape his father Kronos. These myths preserved fragments of Minoan culture, their reverence for bulls, their architectural complexity, their mastery of craftsmanship. Over centuries, the true history blurred, but the essence remained, carried in the epics and dramas of later civilizations. In this way, the Minoans achieved a form of immortality, not in stone or empire, but in the enduring power of story. For centuries after the Minoans vanished, Knossos lay buried under layers of earth and memory. Villagers in the area knew of ancient ruins, Frescoes, but it wasn't until the dawn of the Earthth century that the lost city truly came back to life. In Echenjolbite, British archaeologist Sir Arthur Evans began excavations that would uncover the grandeur of Minoan civilization. Evans purchased the land known as Kafala Hill and soon struck stone walls, storerooms, and vivid fresco fragments. Over the years, his team revealed sprawling palace complexes, ceremonial courtyards, storerooms filled with massive pithoi and delicate artifacts untouched for millennia. The discovery of the Linear A and Linear B scripts added an air of mystery, sparking decades of scholarly debate. Evans was not just a discoverer, he was also a restorer. Using reinforced concrete, he attempted to rebuild parts of the palace to give visitors a sense of its original grandeur. While his reconstructions remain controversial among modern archaeologists, they brought Knossos into the public imagination and made the Minoans a household name. Through his work, the vibrant frescoes of dolphins, priestesses, and bull leapers once again danced in the light, telling stories that had been silent. For over 3,000 years, the rediscovery of Knossos transformed it from a forgotten ruin into one of the most famous archaeological sites in the world, ensuring that the Minoan legacy would inspire future generations. The rediscovery of Knossos sparked fascination and disagreement. While the ruins offered a treasure trove of artifacts and clues, much about the Minoans remains uncertain, fueling ongoing debates among historians and archaeologists. One of the greatest mysteries is the undeciphered Linear A script. Without understanding their written language, scholars can only guess at many aspects of Minoan religion, politics, and daily life. Was Knossos ruled by kings, priestesses, or councils? Did its society lean more toward peace or warfare? The absence of fortifications suggests a peaceful people, yet their myths and artifacts hint at moments of violence and control. Sir Arthur Evans's reconstructions also remain controversial. His use of concrete and vivid repainting gave the public a vision of what he believed the palace once looked like, but critics argue that some choices were speculative, blending archaeological evidence with artistic interpretation. Did the restored palace reflect reality, or a romanticized vision of the past? There are also questions about the Minoans' end. Was it invasion by the Mycenaeans, natural disasters, or internal collapse? Evidence supports all theories to some extent, but no single explanation fits perfectly. These debates keep the Minoans alive. In scholarly conversation, every new excavation, every scientific test on pottery or fresco pigment brings us closer to understanding, but also reminds us that some parts of their story may remain forever hidden in the shadows of time. The wonders of Knossos no longer lie buried in the soil. Many now rest in the Heraclean Archaeological Museum, one of the most important collections of Bronze Age artifacts in the world. 3. Here, visitors can walk among the masterpieces of Minoan craftsmanship, preserved in glass cases and carefully lit to reveal their beauty. The museum's galleries display delicate fresco fragments, their colors still vibrant after more than 3 millennia. The famous Prince of the Lilies strides across a reconstructed panel, his slender form and elaborate crown capturing the elegance of Minoan art. Nearby, the bull-leaping fresco freezes an athlete mid-flight over the back of a charging bull. Ceramic masterpieces line the shelves, marine-style amphorae painted with octopuses, dolphins, and swirling waves. Gold jewelry glitters in another room, intricate necklaces, signet rings, and diadems once worn by Minoan elites. There are also ceremonial rhytons carved from stone, including the striking bull's head rhyton with gilded horns and inlaid shell eyes. Perhaps most mysterious of all are the clay tablets inscribed with Linear A and Linear B, silent records of a world still partly hidden from us. These treasures serve as a bridge between past and present, allowing us to see, almost touch, the artistry and spirit of the Minoans. In them, the voices of Knossos still speak, telling stories that continue to inspire awe in all who listen. Though their civilization vanished over 3,000 years ago, the Minoans still have much to teach us. Their society was built on the principles of artistry, trade, and balance with nature, values that remain relevant in our modern world. From their vibrant frescoes and finely crafted pottery, we learn the importance of beauty in everyday life. The Minoans did not separate art from function. They infused creativity into everything they made, from ceremonial vessels to household jars. This integration of art and utility reminds us that culture thrives when creativity is woven into daily living. Their extensive trade networks reveal the power of connection. The Minoans prospered not through conquest, but through cooperation, exchanging goods and ideas with distant lands. In a time when isolation often breeds conflict, their example shows the benefits of openness and mutual respect. That's their reverence for nature, evident in their religious symbols and harmonious relationship with the sea and land, offers a lesson in sustainability. They recognize that prosperity depended on respecting the environment's limits, a truth we continue to grapple with today. Even in their decline, the Minoans demonstrated resilience. They adapted, blended with other cultures, and carried forward elements of their identity. It is a reminder that cultural legacy can endure, even when political power fades. In studying the Minoans, we are not just looking into the past. We are holding up a mirror to ourselves, seeing the possibilities of a society that valued beauty, balance, and connection. The echoes of Knossos still resound in our modern world. Its myths inspire literature, film, and art, from retellings of the Labyrinth to imagery of bull leaping and dolphin-filled seas. The Minoans' artistic style, their flowing lines, vivid colors, and natural motifs, has influenced everything from architecture to fashion design. Archaeologists and historians continue to draw from Knossos as a case study in early urban planning, maritime trade, and cultural. The palace's multi-story design, light wells, and advanced plumbing systems foreshadowed innovations centuries ahead of their time. Even today, urban designers admire the way the Minoans balanced practicality with aesthetic beauty. In the realm of cultural heritage, Knossos stands as a reminder of the fragility and resilience of civilizations. Its fall warns us of the forces, natural disasters, political upheaval, environmental strain that can undo even the most sophisticated societies. Yet its survival in memory, art, and archaeology shows that cultural identity can outlast political power. Tourists walking through the restored palace courtyards feel the same Mediterranean sun that once warmed Minoan priestesses and traders. Schoolchildren sketch the bull-leaping fresco, and scholars debate the meaning of linear tablets. Knossos lives not just in stone, but in the curiosity it awakens and the creativity it inspires. The Minoans may have vanished as a political power, but their spirit, vibrant, connected, and imaginative, remains a part of our shared human heritage. The Minoans were masters of the sea, not by accident, but through innovation and skill. Their ships, sleek and sturdy, were designed for speed and long-distance travel, making them the lifeline of Crete's prosperity. Built from pine and cypress, with hulls coated in pitch for waterproofing, these vessels could withstand the challenges of the open Mediterranean. Minoan shipbuilders used mortise and tenon joints to lock wooden planks together, creating a smooth, watertight surface. The ships had both oars and sails, allowing them to navigate regardless of wind conditions. Some were small, coastal craft for fishing and local trade, while others were long-distance cargo ships capable of carrying amphorae filled with olive oil, wine, and grain. Navigation relied on the stars, the sun, and careful observation of wind and current patterns. Experienced captains could read the sea wires, recognizing the subtle changes in water color and wave movement that indicated shallow reefs or deep channels. The Minoans' maritime expertise extended their reach across the Aegean and beyond, linking Crete to Egypt, Anatolia, and the Levant. Their ships were not just tools of trade, but symbols of connection, carrying the spirit of Knossos to every shore they touched. While the sea carried the Minoans' ships to distant lands, the fertile valleys and terraced hills of Crete sustained their daily lives. Agriculture was the foundation of Minoan society, providing the food that fueled their bustling cities, festivals, and trade. The Minoans cultivated wheat, barley, and pulses as staple crops, grinding the grains into flour for bread. Olive groves covered the hillsides, producing oil for cooking, lighting, and trade. Vineyards flourished in the warm climate, yielding grapes for wine, a prized export. Figs, pomegranates, and almonds added sweetness to the diet, while herbs such as thyme, oregano, and rosemary flavored meals. Livestock played an important role. Goats and sheep provided milk, cheese, wool, and meat, while oxen were used for plowing and hauling goods. Beekeeping was common, with honey serving as both a sweetener and a key ingredient in ceremonial offerings. The Minoans enjoyed a Mediterranean diet long before the term existed, rich in vegetables, grains, fruits, fish, and moderate amounts of meat. Meals were often shared in open courtyards, accompanied by wine, music, and conversation. Agriculture was not merely survival. It was a connection to the land. Seasonal cycles of planting and harvest were celebrated in festivals, and offerings of the first fruits were made to the gods to ensure fertility and abundance. For the year ahead, the Minoans are often remembered as a peaceful, trade-focused people. Yet their world was not without conflict. While they lacked the massive fortifications seen in Mycenaean cities, the Minoans still developed weapons and tactics to defend their island and assert their influence across the seas. Bronze was the metal of choice, forged into long swords, short daggers, spearheads, and arrowheads. Minoan swords were elegant yet deadly, with leaf-shaped blades designed for slicing rather than thrusting. Spears provided reach in battle, while bows and arrows allowed defense from a distance. Armor was lighter than that of inland warriors, prioritizing mobility. Linen or leather cuirasses, reinforced with bronze plates, were common, along with greaves to protect the shins. Helmets might be made from leather or studded with boar tusks, a style shared with other Aegean cultures. Naval defense was equally important. Ships could be fitted with rams for combat at sea, and crews trained to repel boarders. Minoan mariners were skilled at using the sea's currents and winds to their advantage in any confrontation. While warfare may not have been the Minoans' primary pursuit, they understood its necessity. Weapons were both practical tools and symbols of status. Was, sometimes richly decorated and buried with their owners. Reminders that even a culture devoted to beauty and trade had to be ready for the realities of power and survival. In the bustling city of Knossos, children were the heartbeat of the future. Their days were a blend of play, learning, and helping their families with daily tasks. From an early age, they absorbed the rhythms of Minoan life. The sounds of traders in the market, the scent of baking bread, the sight of sailors setting out to sea. Formal schools, as we think of them today, did not exist. Instead, education was woven into everyday living. Boys learned skills from their fathers, farming, fishing, pottery, or trade, while girls often learned weaving, food preparation, and household management from their mothers. But the lines were not rigid. Children could take on many roles, depending on family needs. Play was important too. Children played with clay figurines, carved wooden animals, knuckle bones, and miniature carts. They ran races in open courtyards, splashed in the shallows at the harbor, and imitated the dances they saw during festivals. Older children might apprentice with craftsmen or assist in palace tasks. Learning by doing, religion also played a role in education. Young people participated in rituals and processions, understanding their place in the community's spiritual life. In Knossos, childhood was both a joyful time of play and a steady path toward adult responsibilities, a preparation for carrying forward the traditions that defined the Minoan world. For the Minoans, death was not an ending, but a passage into another realm. Their burial customs reveal a belief in an afterlife and a desire to honor the dead with care and dignity. Across Crete, archaeologists have uncovered tombs ranging from simple pit graves to elaborate chamber tombs carved into rock. In the earlier periods, tholos tombs, beehive-shaped stone structures, were common. Later, rectangular chamber tombs became more widespread, often shared by multiple generations of a family. The dead were usually placed in a pithos large storage jar, or a wooden coffin, positioned in a fetal posture, perhaps symbolizing rebirth. Grave goods accompanied the deceased: pottery, jewelry, tools, and sometimes weapons. These items reflected the person's status and might serve them in the afterlife. Offerings of food and drink were also left, suggesting ongoing care from the living. Religious symbolism appeared in funerary rituals. The bull, snake, and double axe, all sacred Minoan motifs, sometimes adorned tomb objects. Ceremonies could include libations, burning incense, and processions to the burial site. While the exact beliefs remain a mystery, the care invested in these burials shows the Minoans' deep respect for their ancestors and the continuity between the living and the dead. For them, memory was a form of immortality, and a well-kept tomb was a bridge between worlds. While the Minoans are best known for their connections with Egypt and the Eastern Mediterranean, their trade networks reached far to the west. Archaeological evidence suggests contact with Italy, Sardinia, and even the Iberian Peninsula, carrying Minoan goods and influence across the length of the Mediterranean Sea. Minoan ships brought fine pottery, olive oil, and luxury textiles to these distant shores. In return, they acquired metals, especially copper and tin, essential for making bronze. Sardinia, rich in minerals, was an important stop, while southern Italy provided valuable raw materials and new artistic ideas. This Western trade also carried culture along with goods. Decorative motifs found in Bronze Age Italy and Spain sometimes mirror Minoan styles, suggesting either direct influence or the work of local artisans inspired by imported Cretan pieces. The long voyages were challenging. Crews faced unpredictable storms, piracy, and the need to navigate hundreds of miles without losing sight of land. Yet the Minoans' skill in shipbuilding and seamanship made these journeys possible, expanding their reputation as the Mediterranean's most accomplished mariners. Through this Western network, Knossos gained access to resources that kept its workshops thriving and extended its cultural fingerprint from the Aegean to the far edges of the known world. Long after the fall of the Minoan palaces, the site of Knossos remained a place of life and memory. By the classical Greek period, the city had transformed into a smaller settlement, its Minoan grandeur reduced, but not entirely forgotten. The myths of King Minos, the Labyrinth, and the Minotaur were retold by poets and playwrights, giving Knossos a place in the shared cultural memory of the Hellenic world. In the Hellenistic era, Knossos competed with other Cretan city-states for influence, sometimes engaging in alliances or conflicts. The city retained strategic value due to its fertile surroundings and proximity to maritime trade routes. When the Romans came to Crete in the East century BCE, Knossos fell under their rule and became a modest provincial town. Roman architecture and culture blended with the remnants of the past, Bathhouses, villas, and paved streets rose near the ruins of the old palace. Yet even under Rome, the stories of Minos and the Labyrinth persisted, attracting travelers and chroniclers. By late antiquity, Knossos' political importance waned, but its name endured in legends. The stones of the palace, weathered by centuries, still stood as silent witnesses to an age when Crete ruled the seas. The story of Knossos did not end with its rediscovery. Once Sir Arthur Evans uncovered the great palace in the early 1st century, a new challenge emerged: how to protect it from time, weather, and the thousands of visitors drawn to its wonders each year. Evans himself undertook ambitious restoration efforts, using concrete to rebuild sections of walls, columns, and frescoes. His goal was to give the public a vivid sense of what the palace might have looked like in its prime. While this approach brought Knossos to life, it also sparked controversy. Modern materials and speculative reconstructions sometimes blurred the line between archaeology and imagination. In the decades since, Greek authorities and conservation teams have worked to preserve both the original ruins and Evans's restorations. Frescoes are now protected behind glass or housed in the Heraclean Archaeological Museum. Drainage systems have been improved to guard against winter rains, and fragile areas are cordoned off to limit wear from foot traffic. Modern conservation also uses advanced technology, Sandy scanning, digital mapping, and non-invasive analysis of pigments and stone. These tools allow archaeologists to study Knossos in detail without damaging its delicate remains. The preservation of Knossos is a balancing act, protecting the site's authenticity, while allowing people to experience the magic of walking its ancient corridors. Thanks to ongoing care, the palace continues to stand as one of the world's most extraordinary windows into the Bronze Age. The Minoans, though gone for over 3,000 years, live on vividly in the imagination of the modern world. Their myths, art, and architecture have inspired countless books, films, games, and works of art. The story of King Minos, Ariadne, and the Labyrinth has been retold in everything from classical tragedies to fantasy novels and blockbuster movies. In visual arts, Minoan motifs, the flowing lines of their marine-style pottery, the elegance of their frescoes, and the bold imagery of bulls and dolphins appear in modern paintings, jewelry, and even fashion collections. Designers draw from the vibrant colors and organic shapes of Minoan art to create pieces that feel both ancient and timeless. Video games and films often reinterpret the myths, casting Knossos as a place of mystery, danger, and hidden treasure. Documentaries bring the real history to life, blending archaeological discoveries with computer-generated reconstructions of the palace in its prime. Even architecture borrows from Minoan inspiration. Airy courtyards, painted columns, and geometric patterns appear in modern homes and public buildings. The enduring fascination lies in the Minoans' balance of beauty, sophistication, and mystery. Every time their imagery appears in a gallery, a novel, or a film, the Minoans step out of history and into the present, proving that a civilization's influence can echo across millennia. As we reach the end of our journey through Knossos and the Minoan world, we are left with more than facts and dates. We are left with a sense of connection to a people who lived, dreamed, and created under the same sun that still warms Crete today. The Minoans remind us that a civilization can be both practical and artistic, that trade can be a tool for peace as much as power, and that respect for nature can be central to cultural identity. They thrived not by building high walls, but by building strong relationships across the sea and within their own communities. Even in their decline, their influence did not vanish. It flowed into the Mycenaean world, into Greek myths, and eventually into the heritage of all Mediterranean cultures. The rediscovery of Knossos allowed them to speak again through frescoes that still dance with color and artifacts that still hum with craftsmanship. The legacy of the Minoans is not only in what they left behind, but in the inspiration they offer to create beauty in daily life, to live in balance with the earth, and to understand that even when empires fall, ideas endure. Knossos is more than ruins. It is a reminder that human creativity can echo through time, carried like a bright flame across generations, and so our journey through the Minoans of Knossos comes to an end. From the island's first settlers to the rise of the great palace, from the artistry of its frescoes to the power of its myths, we have walked the winding corridors of history together. We have seen how the Minoans mastered the sea, celebrated life with music and dance, and wove beauty into every corner of their world. Though centuries of change, disaster, and conquest have passed since their time, the spirit of Knossos has never truly vanished. It lingers in the stones of the palace walls, in the treasures preserved in museums, and in the stories that continue to inspire dreamers, artists, and historians alike. The Minoans remind us that civilizations are more than political power. They are the art they create, the ideas they share, and the connections they forge. These things can echo across thousands of years, carrying a legacy far beyond the rise and fall of kingdoms. Thank you for joining me on this voyage into the past. May the story of Knossos inspire you to look for beauty, balance, and connection in your own life, as the Minoans did long ago under the Mediterranean sun.